It is Wednesday, October the 18th. I am John Pollock, joined as always by Brandon Thurston for
Hello.
the always busy Wednesday, although not as busy as last week, where we were anxiously
No.
awaiting numbers to be disseminated. I see a whole lot less interest in NXT numbers that will drop in the next hour this week as compared to last.
Yeah, I'm only using one computer today to do today's podcast. So yeah, I'm sure it'll be a lot less interest. Will it be near the number that they did last week? Probably lower. Probably a lot lower.
Well, I mean, it's it's a marathon. You can't judge 1 week, Brandon. This is the long game that they're playing. We are going to be getting into NXT may come up over this next hour, but I promise you, topic that will come up, Panini. And I know a lot of people, we're going to have some peak viewership today of all you Panini fanatics. You talk about the tribalism between WWE and AEW. In the trading card industry, it's Panini and fanatics. And we have a great guest today, Brandon, to break this down, to make sense of not one, but two suits that we have, correct?
Yes, I think they're being consolidated according to a filing that just dropped like an hour ago. I would like to ask our guest, Paul Lesko, about it, but whether the terminology would be correct to say that they are, one is countersuing the other. But there are two dockets on court, listener, yes, because WWE is trying to terminate their contract with Panini, their trading card licensee, and probably give that license to Fanatics. But Panini is suing them to keep the contract in place. So that's what's happening.
The trading card frenzy. We will get into Paul, who is a great guest and someone that can break all of this down in a pretty entertaining fashion, I think, as well. So for all of you legal heads out there, strap on a seatbelt and get ready as we go down the Panini Fanatics battle. But we have lots to discuss from the past couple of weeks, or past week, I should say, where we talk about who other than Vince McMahon. He has had quite the last 7 days, Brandon. And as you have taken in all of the media information that has been out there, Ari Emanuel, who seems like he has been giving Tony Khan a run for his money when it comes to public statements and whether they have been beneficial or not. Where does Vince McMahon sit right now? What is Vince McMahon's position in TKO/WWE? What have you been able to glean from the past week?
Well, according to a Sports Illustrated article from Justin Barrasso, his job is now to oversee the TV deals. No more creative, reportedly. We'll see how long that lasts. But that appears to be Ari Emanuel's decision, which is consistent with his previous management style to separate the duties clearly.
Yeah. Ari Emanuel, I think, gained... I've got to say, what was the more newsworthy conference of the past month? Was it Code or this Bloomberg conference? I feel like there's a whole separate industry now of these conferences that are starting. It's given I think we've got to get on the ground floor of this, Brandon. I think we could launch our own conference in the next. That's clearly the way to go if you are a media personality out there. But I think that this Bloomberg conference certainly generated quite a bit of interest in our world.
Yeah, well, we had Ari Emanuel, and this is with Lucas Shaw, whose work we've talked about before here. He's done some reporting on the WWE, the sale. We had Ari Emanuel on the first day. I believe it was just a 2-day conference. We had Ari Emanuel saying a lot of things that were newsworthy to our world, but including going after the CEO of CAA, Creative Artist Agency, which is another rival talent agency, Brian Lord. He was going after. Basically talking about a lawsuit that has been filed against CAA, against Disney, against Miramax, related to the Harvey Weinstein sexual assault allegations. And so they're being sued civilly in civil court. And Ari Emanuel said things to the effect of there should be an investigation. Those executives should go on voluntary leave. And then Brian Lord came back at him the next day saying, it's basically saying things to the effect of, I don't know if he's getting his advice on women's issues from the people that he's brought into his company, not naming them, but alluding to Dana White, Vince McMahon, and I suppose as well Conor McGregor you could throw in there.
Yeah, who actually there was just a story that just dropped today from TMZ that the criminal charges that Conor McGregor was facing from an incident at a Miami Heat game earlier this year will not be moving forward. He will not face criminal charges for this alleged, he was being accused of a sexual assault. That's a sidebar note. But yes, it was Ari Emanuel who was stating, we are the company that has morals. We have the better morals. So that's certainly an argument. I don't know if I would be attaching myself if I was in this industry at all. The week that Ari Emanuel is propping up that we're going into Saudi Arabia, it's just that simple.
Getting a nice fee for it, he said. Didn't say how much, but a nice fee.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. Are we about world change? No, we're getting a check for this. But yes, he certainly set himself up for this return volley. If for nothing else, I mean, we somewhat are a little jaded, I think, Brandon, when it comes to, do the Dana Whites and the Vince McMahons of the world, do they really hold much weight outside of the world? Are they held to anything? Well, it turns out in a back and forth volley between moral superiority, yes, they can be pawns in arguments when it comes up to people. They are knowledgeable of the actions of Vince McMahon and Dana White when it comes to throwing something back at Ari Emanuel's face.
Yeah, I guess the merger, now the fact that WWE is part of this merged company with UFC and is overseen by Endeavor's CEO, who's also the CEO of TKO. It just pulls, I guess, to a little bit of an extent, and UFC for that matter, more into a mainstream world where you're connected to these big talent agency executives, including Ari Emanuel, who are, just more part of the wider media and entertainment world.
Yes, the Hollywood Reporter also had a pretty in-depth story on this whole back and forth between CAA and Ari Emanuel as well, and naming the names of Dana White and Vince McMahon to connect the dots for anyone who was maybe scratching their head about, wait a minute, what could they possibly be talking about? But there you have it. Also, we should note this was the day that TKO went public there on that photo with these giant championship replica belts that apparently these are going to be their new postal code signage that they can have right outside of their headquarters. We're going to get a giant WWE belt that is now displayed. So if you're ever looking like which building is WWE, this is going to help you out. If I imagine there will be one coming to Las Vegas in a time to be determined.
Yeah, is there one going to UFC too? I don't know if this is the same belt. I guess it's a new structure, belt-like structure that has been constructed outside of the new headquarters. But yes, that was in the Stanford Advocate, I think yesterday.
Yes, look at this strategically placed ladder. I mean, I'm certain we're going to get eventually an on-site brawl around this thing at some point in time in the future. But if you're curious, like what these record revenues are going towards, I mean, this is step one.
Yeah, it is. I tweeted last night. The trouble with having record-breaking profits and having more cost efficiencies than ever, not having as many employees to have to pay, is you have to spend that money. And that's, I mean, that's a real point that somebody who's who knows the financial world brought up to me once, is that when you have a company that's going to be a lot more profitable than it ever was before, at least in the case of WWE, even before they were going to have a merger, when they're going to have higher rights fees, even if it's a disappointing deal, they're going to have more money and have more profitability. What do you do with that extra money? How do you invest it? Because that apparently that can be a problem for other companies. It has been a problem for other companies.
So also coming out of the Bloomberg conference was a sit down that Lucas Shaw did with Bill Simmons that mainly focused on sort of the state of the podcasting industry that I think many people look at, especially in the overture of sports podcasting and by extension sports documentaries. Bill Simmons has become the person I think a lot of people associate with this, and he's very bullish on the podcast industry. Brandon, you can't just be a celebrity and turn on your microphone and expect that it's going to be successful. So instant celebrity does not mean success in podcasting. So as much as you and I are just simply relying on our celebrity, it's not going to be enough. Okay, no. You need to have some substance there as well. But he was also asked about the Vince. Actually, he volunteered this information that he thinks the Vince McMahon documentary could be one of the best that he's ever been involved with, and
it's happening after all.
It is happening. Yeah, this thing had gone relatively quiet over these past the past year at this point, and this was transcribed by the great Andrew Thompson. We have this Vince McMahon documentary we've been working on for 3 years. I think it has a chance to be really great. I really think it has the chance to be the best one I've been involved with. And I'll be interested to see what people think about that one, because a lot of time, and it was one where Netflix still has a final cut of it, and it's a little more old school, like what the 30 for 30 model was. And I think it has a chance to be really special. And then he was asked about if Vince McMahon gets to see the documentary before it comes out. And he said, not the giving of notes on the final cut part. I think they get to look at clips. whatever that means. So maybe he gets like a sizzle reel of the best of, and then he can tune in to Netflix. That could be the bonus right there, is Vince McMahon setting up his Netflix subscription, maybe giving his thoughts on an ad-free model or not for Netflix, and then watching his own documentary. But this thing is coming out. It will be intensely scrutinized and discussed. And I would venture to guess that Vince McMahon is going to do a grand total of 0 interviews promoting this. That's my official bet.
I would think so.
Because when this was first announced, I thought this was going to be the Vince McMahon media tour, like we saw with The Undertaker. Like, I feel this one is going to be. I don't think they want Vince McMahon out there.
What incentive would he have? Does it? I guess it's you're partnering with Netflix somewhat here. Is there money going to WWE because of this? Is there some sort of licensing that WWE is getting out of this deal? It's not clear, right?
I can't imagine WWE is not involved in this.
I suppose. Well, remember this news was broken on a W earnings call, so that makes me think yes, there's definitely some sort of licensing happening here. I guess I just don't know enough about documentary filmmaking. Like, why do you need a W license to do this, to make a documentary about Vince McMahon's life?
You don't need it, but with it comes what control you do give up. I mean, this is the whole discussion about the various sports documentaries we're stating. Exactly. It's here you have access to anyone you want. The Vince McMahon documentary, an approved one by WWE, is going to give you all of the access, all of the various footage that I think there's workarounds for that, as you can see with other examples, Dark Side of the Ring. But to do a whole Vince McMahon documentary without Vince McMahon, that's going to require WWE cooperation. And you can argue like what you're looking for out of this. They are looking for a critical hit and Vince McMahon speaking about his career versus sort of a documentary where Vince is not involved in the process. Which you were interviewed for one of these, Vince McMahon.
Not this one.
Not this one, but you were involved in a separate Vince McMahon doc last year that I don't believe Vince took part in.
No, the Vice documentary, he did not take part in that. But this was announced pre-scandal. I think like a year before the scandal. This was when this news was broken by Nick Khan on an earnings call. At least at the time, I think they billed it as a 4-part documentary. I don't know if that's
right. It sounds like this is just going to be a one-off documentary. He's not getting the David Beckham treatment.
So it's only going to be one episode.
That's what I took from this.
Feature film length.
Yeah, that was my impression from this latest answer.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in terms of how critical this will be, I mean, I think Bill Simmons interviews on his podcast with, I guess, Nick Khan. I don't know if he's interviewed other WWE people, but he's done a couple interviews with Nick Khan, and I think that probably gives you some reflection of what to expect in terms of how honest this is going to be. He did, when he had Nick Khan on shortly after Vince forced his way back into the company, he did pursue an independent feeling line of questioning around certain issues, including he brought up, the Rita Chatterton allegations to Nick and things like that. So there's some reason to believe and hope that this is going to be an honest documentary. Then again, W's involved in it, so I think that will mix it up a bit.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you're looking at this as just it's a, let's say, 2-hour runtime max, how much are the scandals going to be part of the Vince McMahon story? This is going to be one of those where, I mean, you're not going to be able to. Are they just going to try to cover as much as you can, and it's nothing too in depth on any one subject, but try to give a little on the biggest touchstones of his career, and then, towards the 90-minute mark, well, there was also this, but let's not let that overshadow all the other great contributions. We all make mistakes.
Yes. I mean, in terms of like whether people talk about this documentary, there's got to be new information in it, I guess. And I get the impression that there's going to be Vince talking head pieces in this. And is he going to say something that's really newsworthy out of it, or new information coming out of it? I guess that will be one of the biggest questions to see whether this is something that, gets a lot of people watching it, for one thing, on Netflix.
Do you think they'll get Test to do an interview?
I don't think Test is live anymore.
Oh,
Bill Simmons did not know that, though, until recently. He's learned.
But Nick Khan did, and that was. I'm serious. Of the Nick Khan media appearances, that might be one of the most impressive. Instant knew that off the top of his head. So major points for Nick Khan on that one. But yes, the Vince McMahon documentary. We will. I'm sure we'll catch it when it comes out. John Orand had a piece on Sports Business Journal called The Media Rights Squeeze. And this did include his thoughts on the WWE with its announcement of SmackDown going to NBC with a 40% rights increase. But he writes, WWE still has its top Raw package on the market, as does the UFC, which will see its current ESPN deal end in 2025. And then mentioning the NBA rights and that the exclusive negotiating window with their incumbents, ESPN and Warner Brothers Discovery, ends in the spring. And all the expectation is that there will be many streaming players in the game. NBC likely kicking the tires of getting back into the NBA business, and where essentially it's the NBA sorting itself out, and then all of these outlets then seeing what money we have to play with and how that's going to affect the rest of the sports media landscape for the years to come. And the idea that if you are a top priority, you shouldn't feel the squeeze too much, but there's definitely a restraint that's going on when it comes to the days of just throwing stupid money out there that might be reserved for the NFL only, and to a degree the NBA. But it sounds like even ESPN and Warner Brothers Discovery are not just writing a blank check for the ability to retain the NBA rights.
Yeah. So I've said before that I think it's going to be at least until after the NBA deal is done before WWE, maybe even AEW deals get done. I did not realize that the exclusive negotiating window does not end until the spring. In NBA's current deal, which was announced in October 2024, we're now at the same point in that cycle as we are now, and there's no new deal. I don't know if the negotiating window exclusivity was timed differently in that deal or what, but that seems like a long time to wait through the spring, say for Raw to have unknown home in September, which at that, but let's say it's spring, it's May, and we're looking at September, not knowing where Raw is going to be. So maybe it will be done, but I didn't realize it was that long of a wait before the NBA deal has to be done. And as for AEW, I guess AEW would be expiring December. There's debate. I think Dave said to us September, fall 2024. It's either that or it's either September or December, somewhere around that range. So that's a similar, amount of time that would be left at that point before the deals are going to expire. So maybe both of these deals will be done before the NBA, or maybe you've got more of an idea of where it's going to end up by then. But yeah, it's I would expect still AEW to stay with WBD. No idea where Raw is going to end up. But I was doing some thinking and some math earlier today to try to figure out how much. I was doing a lot of math. We'll try to make it concise here. How much is the AEW pay-per-view content worth? If we speculate, well, maybe they'll end up on Max. Maybe next day rights end up on Max. The TV deals get renewed. But if they're going to take that off of pay-per-view, I was doing the math to try to figure out, how much money is AEW making right now on pay-per-view? And the answer is they're making something like on all 12, let's say, if they do 12, and do we think they're going to do 12? I think they're at least, whether or not you include the Ring of Honor pay-per-views, they're heading towards something like, let's say 10 or 12 per year. So I was doing this to say, well, let's say they do 12 in a year, and just looking at this domestically, sorry, international fans, if AEW pay-per-views end up on Max, it probably doesn't mean anything for you. You're still going to be buying it on Fight. So figuring about 70% of the buys are domestic, let's assume, which I think is true. It's pretty close to accurate, right? It's $50 per pay-per-view. So we get if they do 12, they go to the point where they're doing 12, we get $54 million a year gross before you split it with the carriers. Let's say the average split is about 45%, which what used to be the traditional split. That ends up with about $24 million going to AEW. So I think what that means is if you're going to do 12 a year, Max has got to pay you something well in excess of $24 million a year for that content. So I think the key questions are, how many AEW pay-per-view buyers don't already subscribe to Max here in the United States? I don't know, like what do you think is a good guess on that? I said like maybe 50%. Like my household, if those pay-per-views go to Max, I'm already a Max household.
Yeah, it's also such an interesting period where if you are AEW and you could have the belief that as we expand our pay-per-views per year, we're going to get more people in the habit of buying these shows, and buys are going to, even if the average goes somewhat lower than for a year, overall we're going to be growing. And I think naturally you're going to have your growth expectation maybe further ahead than what's reality. And if you're the max side, you could be arguing that this is the absolute peak that you are going to hit, and there's going to be a certain like over flooding of the market with your pay-per-views. You could have two very competing viewpoints of what an expanded pay-per-view calendar is going to mean for AEW. If it is going to see a big growth per show, or if you're going to see people picking and choosing at a larger scale, and moving from this model of 5 per year to what we could see as easily 10, if not more, next year.
So if I imagine I'm Gunnar Weidenfelds, who is the very economical CFO of WBD.
I always envision, what would I be if I was
what would I do?
Gunther? Yeah.
What would I do if I was Gunnar?
Who's
like reportedly he's the one who calls people up and you know, there was that line in the I think it was the Hollywood Reporter piece about WBD and David Zaslav, where like, oh, if Gunnar's calling you, you know you're effed. You know your show's about to get cut. But anyway, if they can, let's say, you know, pay-per-views go to Max, all of them, and maybe half of the regular pay-per-view buyers, which is, let's say on average domestically, there's like 90,000, 100,000 domestic pay-per-view buyers, because we know they're doing like 130, 140, something like that. And let's say half of them are not subscribers, they become monthly subscribers because of that. Well, that's an incremental revenue for Max, the streaming service, on an annual basis of something like $7 million, which is well below what those pay-per-views would generate if they were strictly exclusively sold on pay-per-view. So then I started thinking, well, maybe what if they just took the 4 biggest ones and separated that from the equation and just made this deal something like what it would be for the B pay-per-views, and kept the big 4, or whatever you want to consider the big 4, keep those big pay-per-views strictly on pay-per-view. And I still end up with, you know, not enough incremental subscriber revenue going to Max here. So my conclusion, long story short, is that I can't figure out how this deal makes sense, how Max can justify giving AEW enough money to take these off of pay-per-view so that it's making more money for AEW in the end. Because right, they're not going to take it off of pay-per-view if you're not going to give them more money than they're making on pay-per-view otherwise, right? And I can't really figure out how it would make sense.
And I think as well, it's kind of like what Tony Khan mentioned in the recent call with the media, of the idea like they're not going to do some trial period here. I mean, that would just be suicide for your pay-per-view business if you were to try this out for a year and then it's not absorbed, or you had to step backwards. I think that would be death for them. And I'm also curious, like, what is, like, obviously for AEW, it's a financial incentive if you were to take this Max model, but is it a top priority for Tony Khan to get onto a streaming platform versus traditional pay-per-view, where you have been able to demonstrate a very healthy audience that is willing to spend X amount more for your pay-per-views, willing to spend much more than the price of a Max subscription each month? And how much more does that value you, that you have this audience that is willing to spend this amount of money for something where you move to a streaming model? And there's no coming back from this. I don't think you can reverse this one. So it's,
and we're talking about, what I'm talking about here is just the Peacock WWE model, right? Where all the pay-per-views are part of the subscription plan, right?
Right. As opposed to the ESPN Plus
upsell with UFC.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it is important for AEW to be on a streaming service, because I think that the lesson of Peacock, those pay-per-views being on Peacock helped WWE pre-Vince leaving, removing himself from creative, or being removed from creative, whatever. That helps WWE mitigate what was a popularity free fall for a number of years in a row. I think just being in an increased number of homes that were cord cutting homes or whatever, I think that really helped Peacock. It really helps WWE gain its reach and mitigate its popularity decline, and ultimately turn it around.
We'll bring in our guest in just 1 minute, but this does somewhat dovetail another big story this week, and that is, and this has been rumored for several weeks, but made official by Showtime, by extension Paramount. They are getting out of mixed martial arts and boxing at the end of this year. So this will affect Bellator. This will affect all of their boxing cards, and Showtime has been broadcasting boxing for the last 37 years. And of course, Viacom, they have a ownership in Bellator, which has been long rumored to be sold. And the future of Bellator very much up in the air. And they have another show scheduled for November 17th, but there's nothing on the books beyond that. Showtime Championship Boxing, they're doing a pay-per-view at the end of November with David Benavidez fighting. But this is pretty seismic when it comes to boxing, and just a few years after HBO got out of boxing, as well as they are making the pivot to scripted programming to increase subscribers for Paramount Plus. And they don't feel that combat sports is a lane they care to occupy any longer. And I know this is going to bring an end probably to your Bellator fandom, Brandon.
Yes, that's it. That Dana White is thrilled, I've heard, with this news. It's going to lead to some job cuts, I understand too, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
But Paramount is one of these companies that, I don't know what's going to happen to them. I think they're going to end up being consolidated with one of the bigger players or something like that. We get, in terms of sports rights bidding, they're one of the last names that gets brought up these days. I know they're deeply involved, obviously, in the NFL and in college football, but in college basketball. But in terms of wrestling rights, certainly for one thing, it's nobody ever thinks about, well, is MTV gonna or is Paramount gonna take wrestling again?
Yeah, this is much more, Showtime has never really displayed that kind of keen interest in adding pro wrestling to the portfolio. But when it comes to boxing, I mean, in the heyday of Mike Tyson fights, I mean, Showtime, what was his home for a long period of time, they put together with the UFC, the Floyd Mayweather Jr., Conor McGregor fight back in 2017. And they've been pretty embedded with MMA going back to Elite XC in 2007. So a very sizable story, as is all the legal drama that, I mean, we just can't get enough of. And the WWE is in another one. And here to make sense of it all for us, joining us for the first time is Paul Lesko, who is here to break down the Panini Fanatics Wars. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
So, I mean, for some people that are tuning in, I'm sure they're aware of this legal dispute that is going on between the WWE and Panini. As best you can describe for people trying to get the Cole's notes of this, what is at the heart of the contention on the part of Panini, and how this unique relationship with WWE seems to have fallen apart over the last few months?
Sure. So what you have is Panini is the exclusive licensee for making trading cards for WWE, meaning they're the only ones that can do it. They pay a premium and they have this locked up for multiple years. In the trading card world, there's some turmoil going on because Fanatics has entered this realm and is starting to take a lot of the licenses that are out there to become the biggest trading card company that's out there. And so recently what's happened is in just this August, WWE sent a letter to Panini saying, hey, we know we have this exclusive license, but you're in breach. You have not been making trading card games for WWE, and you also have not been making digital trading cards. So because of that, we want to end our relationship immediately, and we want to give the license to Fanatics. Also, they want, this is a multiple year contract that they had with Panini. They want all the money that Panini owes them over this time frame. It's like between $5 and $6 million that paid right away. Panini they were caught off guard by this because the violations that they're accused of happened 15 months ago. And during this time frame, WWE never said anything about it until they got the termination letter and said, hey, we're going to go to Fanatics. So both sides ended up suing each other. Panini sued WWE saying, hey, judge, we need you to say that this contract is still valid. We haven't done anything wrong. And if we've done anything wrong, WWE took so long to tell us we're in breach. They basically, legally forgiven it. And WWE says, no, they're in breach. They were supposed to do 2 product lines that aren't out there. Those aren't curable. You can't fix that. And right now, because Panini isn't who we've chosen to be our licensee, basically they're running rogue with our IP. They're making cards. We don't want them doing it. We need you, Judge, to actually end this relationship. Tell them to stop doing it. And WWE threw out the first big punch too. They tried to get what's called a temporary restraining order. They wanted the judge to say, normally you wait till the end of the case to win. They're saying, Judge, our case is so strong. Tell Panini we win now and shut them down right now. The judges, we don't know why. It was on during live at the actual hearing, denied WWE's TRO motion. So at least for now, Panini can continue to make WWE cards, but WWE now has filed what's called a preliminary injunction motion to try to seek to shut down the cards again before they win the lawsuit. But that'll take a little bit, it's a little bit slower of a process, but still, should WWE win this time, they'll shut down trading cards from Panini by the end of this year.
Yeah, so when I was trying to learn about this case, I've read that Panini is involved in quite a few lawsuits with Fanatics. And it seems like a lot of licensees, right, are leaving Panini, like the NFLPA. I know there's talk of in this lawsuit, there's mentioning that the NBA rights are leaving them soon. So, and I know as part of this lawsuit as well, it's mentioned that Panini looked like it was going to get into a merger with Fanatics, but then that fell apart. So I honestly just have some naivete around like what exactly is going on with Panini. It sounds like their company is being turned upside down.
It is a crazy time in trading cards right now. So when before Fanatics entered the field, Panini was the big company that was out there. They had the NBA rights, both from the league and from the players, locked up for multiple years. They had for the NFL, they had players' rights, and they also had the league locked up. And then they had WWE. They were the big card producer that was out there. So then Fanatics comes in, buys Topps. And soon after they buy Topps, which got them the rights to baseball, they then somehow got the future rights for the NFL and for the NBA immediately after Panini's contracts end in either 2025 or 2026, depending on what contracts you are. So basically, Fanatics is going to come in and replace Panini for all intents and purposes in trading cards. And that's what's given rise to a lot of lawsuits, because Panini has filed an antitrust lawsuit against Fanatics saying, hey, they're now this unlawful monopoly. They're going to own all the licenses. They're going to make all the trading cards. There's no room for little companies like us, even though Panini's had exclusive licenses for quite a long time. Panini's also suing Fanatics because Fanatics, at least 35 employees left Panini to go to Fanatics. And Panini saying that those employees were stolen. So that's another lawsuit that's going on. The NFLPA, like WWE, wants to get out of their license with Panini also. So there's an arbitration, which unfortunately takes place in secret. So we don't know what's going on there. But that's another kind of situation similar to the WWE, where they are actually saying, hey, we want to go to Fanatics also. But we have to, have the judge or the arbitrator here rule in our favor. And so there's just, if you can imagine, just nuclear missiles flying back and forth all over the place. It's Panini's really fighting for its life, and Fanatics is fighting to be the next big dog out there.
And with the NBA PA, they're trying to get out of their deal. It's for a different reason, though, than WWE is trying to get out of their deal. WWE is saying, I think, as you mentioned, right, that they didn't create the physical trading cards and the trading card games, the digital trading cards and the trading card games that they were supposed to according to the contract. But NFL has a different reason. Would you remind us what that is?
Yeah, so the NFLPA, they're trying to get out of their contract, saying that there's been a change in control at Panini. Yes. And normally we haven't been able to see the license agreement between the NFLPA and Panini because, companies keep all their contracts as secret as they can. But normally you have what's called a change of control provision in there, where if, a certain amount of your board turns over, or if a certain number of employees leave, or sometimes you say, if the people that are in charge of my product line, if they leave, then you're in breach and we have the option to terminate our contract. That's the provision that it looks like the NFLPA is proceeding under. So they're not saying that WWE, or they're not saying that Panini hasn't made all the cards that they need to. They're saying that we're worried the fact that you've lost 35 employees. You've lost some important employees, including those that handled our accounts, and therefore we should be out. And that's a similar issue. It's a side issue to what WWE said, because they noted in their most recent filing that they used to have 4 employees at Panini that handled their accounts. And they had, at least one of them had 12 years experience working with, in this field. 3 of them left. And now the sole person that's working that account, according to the WWE, is somebody who's been out of school for a year and already seems
this poor guy.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, 21-year-old who's stuck with the WWE account.
Yes.
I mean, good for him. That's going to look great on the resume, but not necessarily good for their business relationship.
I think like a LinkedIn generated resume is an exhibit to the lawsuit too, because
there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So what's the status of Panini's suit against Fanatics? Like, you could certainly look at this. Like, WWE had announced when they last year with the Fanatics deal, like, Panini's essentially a lame duck deal, because as soon as this deal's up with Panini, we're planning to take our business over there. You mentioned these employees leaving for Fanatics from Panini. Like, certainly there seems to be some argument here about predatory practices, but what is the state of their suit with Fanatics?
So there's 3 actual lawsuits between Panini and Fanatics that are going back and forth. There's the alleged theft of employees. Fanatics sued Panini for unfair competition, and then there's the antitrust lawsuit. And antitrust lawsuits take forever. Both sides exchanged proposed schedules or filed proposed schedules with the judge today. And at the earliest, that antitrust lawsuit will be over in November of 2025. That's the earliest it'll be over. So, when you're trying to figure out like the dominoes, what's going to fall to first and happen, well, probably the NFLPA action with Panini will fall first. The WWE action with Panini will fall second. And then a couple of years later, well, the antitrust case will resolve itself. And I think that's the interesting thing for anybody who's following all this litigation for the trading cards. Whoever wins the NFLPA case with Panini and whoever wins the WWE case with Panini, both sides, Fanatics will be pointing if Panini loses. If Panini wins, they'll be pointing that as to why there's been antitrust. So it's a complicated web. All these cases should be in front of the same judge, because there's so many related issues, and they're not. Luckily, the parties in the WWE and Panini case, even though they had 2 separate lawsuits, Panini actually sued WWE first, and then WWE sued Panini in the same day. They've agreed they're going to consolidate their cases they've already been in front of the same judge, but they're 2 different cases. But now they will be one case there. But it's a mess where anything could happen to any of these cases, and they all affect each other.
And like, do you get a sense of like what is really motivating WB in this case? So they're not alleging, unless I'm wrong, they're not alleging that Panini has not paid them on the deal or anything. I almost get the sense that they're kind of copying the NFL's homework here. If the NFL can get out of their deal, I suppose that they're being offered something better by Fanatics.
I think I always like to just work by what the court documents say. And in cases like this, they keep there are some things that are filed under seal. But the WWE, what they've said is they're concerned about the future of Panini. They've already lost a bunch of employees. They're losing certain licenses. They're worried about the viability of Panini to continue to handle the account. There are no complaints about how WWE or Panini has handled the account to date. In fact, Panini points out, hey, we tripled your revenue from the last licensee. You've done nothing but compliment what we've done. So it's more of a, hey, we're really worried about the future. And WWE did point out that there have been some late payments or later payments than they would like, which has affected like autographs. You have a certain amount of money that gets paid for autographs that are signed, and then that money goes directly to the talent. They get that money. And because of the turnover with employees at Panini, there's been a delay in getting that money to the talent. And the WWE says, hey, some of these late payments we're making to our wrestling, our people, it's not good for our relationship. So that's why we went out. We want predictability. We want reliability. And we already said in the future, we're going to work with Fanatics. Let's just start doing that right now.
Yeah. And it would look on the surface that this would seem like a pretty untenable relationship to continue. But from all indications, Panini is more than willing, and probably for just self-preservation at this point, that this WWE account is sizable enough that they will go through whatever rough waters this has created to see the end of this deal.
Yeah, and not only that, but I think the judge, we've got a limited part of the transcript was released from the temporary restraining order hearing. And in there, the judge noted and said, hey, I'm not seeing any complaints about quality of the cards or of what's being released here. So this isn't the example where Panini's going rogue and just using your intellectual property incorrectly. They're still making you money. And so that's kind of an important, thought process that we're seeing, because in order to get a temporary restraining order, you have to show that you're being irreparably harmed. You're being harmed some way that, money can't make you whole. And, the judge is saying, hey, these guys want to do your work. They're doing a good job for you. You just think in the future, they're not going to be able to do it. So why should I rule now? Let's go through the whole case and then I'll rule later. So it'll be very interesting to see how the preliminary injunction hearing goes, see where the judge's head is. WWE has more arguments. I think ultimately WWE wins this case, but is it going to be in 2 years or will it be in 2 months? That's really the focus. And if, WWE wins in 2 years, well, Panini has won too. Their contract's over. So you kind of see this next hearing is the most important hearing in the case.
Yeah. Is there a pretty good chance that this will end up in a settlement?
90% of cases don't go to trial. Most of them end in settlement. And I think at some point there's probably going to be a huge global settlement where Panini gives its licenses to Fanatics. Then Fanatics runs from there. There's probably they're going to get paid by Fanatics paying Panini. We won't know any of the conditions.
This would be Panini getting paid in a settlement.
Yes. Yeah. So, looking at the antitrust lawsuit, apparently Fanatics had a deal worked out with Panini where Panini was going to sell them the exclusive licenses for the NFL, for the NBA, and quite possibly for WWE. So there was a business deal that was in the works, and Panini actually talked to WWE about, hey, can we amend our contract so that Fanatics can buy us out and the Fanatics can actually take over the license. So there is a chance that, once cooler heads prevail, someone has to start losing some motions first. Everybody's pretty angry at this point, but there might be a deal where Fanatics pays Panini, Panini gives up the licenses, goes away, and then Fanatics does what it's supposed to be doing in 2025 and 2026, just 2 years earlier.
And do we have a date for the next hearing that's coming up?
Oh, I might have locked up a little bit there. Sorry.
do we know the date of that next hearing that's coming up?
Can you hear me? I'm sorry, I locked up there a little bit.
Oh, I don't know if can you hear me okay
we
now?
Don't know the date just yet. I can hear you now. I can hear you now. So we don't know the date yet for the hearing. We're going to have the parties are going to send a letter to the court, I think, next week, explaining when they think a hearing will be. But you're probably looking at 3 weeks to 4 weeks for a hearing.
All right. Well, Paul, I want to thank you very much for enlightening us on the status of this ongoing legal dispute between WWE and Panini. And as the drama continues, maybe we can have you on back sometime to chat about this, because it's a really interesting case from both sides. I feel there's like a 30 for 30 documentary in this whole thing.
Yeah.
That would be great. That'd be great. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed this.
And Paul is tweeting about this case all the time. If you want to stay up with what is the latest news on this.
Yes,
yeah, if you just, I'm always on Twitter. Anytime there's any new filings, not just for this case, but for any case that involves trading cards, I like to translate the legal filings. So you can follow me at Paul_Lesko on Twitter.
Thanks a lot, Paul. We appreciate the time.
No, thanks for having me on. Bye, guys.
All right, Paul Lesko, everyone. You can follow him, Paul_Lesko, Lesko. And didn't even mention it there. The other interesting wrinkle in all of this is that Panini is also in business with the UFC for their trading cards on top of it. Yes. So I haven't heard any complaints from UFC. Like, we're doing fine here. So anyway,
stay tuned to Darren Ravel's Twitter to see if there's any announcements on that.
Yeah, the trading card industry is something I find fascinating. It was when they first announced the Panini deal. You do remember they were making that initial effort on like their NFTs and such, and those have extremely. Like, I don't hear any mention of that by WWE anymore in terms of something they were marketing actively. But I'm so behind on the NFT market. It sounds like it's something that is come and gone. Is it safe to say?
I think most NFTs are close to valueless at this point.
stunning. Like not something I could have foreseen at all when the craze was beginning for the time it had. All right, we have a few more topics here, and if you want to get in a super chat, you're welcome to do so. We do have one here from Jamie Stalker, who sends in this super chat. Thank you, Jamie. As a card collector, this is such an interesting time. Panini have provided a different audience into the hobby market. Example, breakers and some record-breaking card sales. AEW and Upper Deck have an open market right now. Yes, that is AEW's trading card partner, Upper Deck as well. So everyone has their trading card partners. This is, by my admission, this is an area I'm not a expert on, but the trading card market has exploded over the last number of years, and there's a lot of money at stake for these card companies.
Physical trading cards, not digital trading cards.
Dude, I think that there's like a total like nostalgia of like traditional trading cards on top of it. Were you ever a card collector of any sort?
I had a lot of NFL trading cards. I had a few binders. I think the last time I moved, well, a couple times ago when I moved, I think I like gave them all away. Not like early 90s NFL trading cards. I like gave them all the way to a thrift store.
So I posted an image of this, but I was away with my family this week, and I wandered into this like very old like used bookstore with my son. And there I see this like stack of these old wrestling magazines. So I take a look at them, and I find this Ring wrestling magazine from 1964.
Whoa.
And I just take a look at it, and how much is this? Like $5.
Really?
$5. This thing is amazing, dude. Like the editorial.
Is that what you posted the other day?
Yes.
Okay.
They've got like an in-character feature on Gorilla Monsoon, rankings, the history of the cauliflower ear, how to diagnose it. I mean, it's really something fascinating to look at. But I am not typically a magazine purchaser, but this was too good to be true for $5. So that was my big expense this week. Moving on. We also wanted to, actually, this is a question I had for you, and I didn't put on the rundown, so I'm throwing this at Brandon blind. But this coming Saturday, it is Impact's Bound for Glory. And here we are, as Impact is now 21 years old. They will be holding their pay-per-view. And my question to you is, where is Impact Wrestling after 21 years and its place within the pro wrestling landscape? Like, it's this very odd area that it holds in the company that I think many companies would not have survived the tumultuous waters that this company has navigated, not just once, but multiple times in its history, that you felt they were near death. And here they are under what seems to be pretty secure ownership. But what place does an Impact hold as we go into this, their annual big show of the year?
It's weird. Like, I remember when the NWA started, and part of the reason why they wanted to use the NWA brand and why they spent, I don't know, probably a few $100,000 to buy it, was that it was a brand that people recognized rather than starting out with something new. And Impact, despite having rebranded itself, it used to be Total Nonstop Action. I think a lot of its relevancy, it would be a lot harder for it to get as much attention as even it still does without that legacy behind it. But in a lot of ways, I look at, what's on the shows, and it's like, wow, this is like a Border City wrestling show all grown up.
Border City wrestling all grown up. That's not the worst tagline there. It's just a company that, I mean, there's a fascinating story about the history of this company and where it is now. And I can't say that history of this company, it's necessarily a feel-good story. I mean, the fact that it's around and there are places for people to work, I think are great. I also look at the opportunities it had when we look at what Spike TV was in its heyday, and that was one of its key programming partners was TNA, Impact Wrestling, and sort of what was lost or what opportunities were missed that led to them spiraling out of control. But here they are, and thankfully they found an outlet that was willing to absorb whatever losses they had and keep them going, and able to get out of, like, when Anthem first bought this company, like, there was such a negative taint on this company. And I do feel they have been able to absolve themselves of that negativity, but they're also at a place where I think their relevance is low, but it's at a time when those that do watch Impact, like, you typically hear positive things. It's a small number of people that are following this.
Going head to head with Collision. Is that right?
That's right. They will be going head to head with Collision on Saturday night, which after the 1 week at 8 p.m., they were back. So anyone that tuned in last week, you had the heads up from Brandon that Collision might be at 8 p.m. I still do not quite understand how that worked out, where the way an MLB game turned out affected a program on TNT that would not have been carrying this MLB game, but somehow it affected their airing of Collision to air at 8.
Yeah, I have no idea. And they even advertised it on Dynamite, 7:00 start, but no, it was still 8.
Well, the result was 504,000 viewers this past Saturday, a 0.14 in the demo, way up from the previous 2 weeks, which went again an NXT PLE and WWE Fastlane. This was for Bryan Danielson and Christian Cage in the main event, and I would say this is a number that it was up. It was against a big football game, and I do wonder if there was confusion from people about when this was starting. What were any of your conclusions based off of this number? I mean, this was a weird one where Wednesday or Tuesday, I should say, on Dynamite, they were promoting one time slot when it ended up being another.
Yeah, I mean, they were going against, they're coming off of 2 weeks where they're going against WPLEs, and it had better be a lot better than it was the prior 2 weeks, and it was. Does it make that much of a difference that it was originally scheduled at, or originally advertised at 7 and ended up being at 8? I don't know. It's the normal time slot. I imagine the difference is minimal. And then, like, as far as what this show is doing now, it's doing like just on the cusp, I think, of what it needs to do to have a significant value add to whatever AEW's next TV deal is, which is, I think it did. Did Rampage also do a 0.14
yes,
the night before?
Yeah, so Rampage, 407,000 viewers, so much lower by almost 100,000 viewers, but a 0.14 in the demo. They actually just edged out Collision in the demo, 188 to 185.
Yeah, despite a 100,000 viewer difference between Rampage and Collision.
So I mean, it does tell you there is a, well, I would say a younger audience, but in some cases, Rampage had a larger, at least among larger, younger women, I should say, outranking Collision. Yeah, I think this is relatively like the range we're going to see. I don't know how many weeks you're going to have a gigantic marquee match. Not that Danielson and Christian is the biggest match you can put on television, but I would say it's above the level of a typical Collision main event that you're going to have. And definitely you can look at Brandon's quarter hours here. It was a difference maker in terms of what people were interested in, and the fact that you also got the Collision overrun. They're starting to fall in love with these overruns.
Yeah, it seems like something that they get for just about every Dynamite and Collision now. But yeah, and that Rampage, by the way, probably was helped by the fact that it was going on after an NBA preseason game. So maybe that enhanced what that rating was in terms of it being so close to Collision. But yeah, this main event between Christian Cage is like it's like burned in my head. He seems to be seems to be always calling Christian Cage matches. But anyway, this did well for the quarter hours. I mean, if you look at the demo, the first half of the match fell in the demo by 12%. I don't know how to read that, but it was up both in total viewership and in the demo for the last half of the match, which was the last full quarter of the show. If you rule out the first quarter, which may have benefited from, I don't know, probably the movie or whatever was on right before it, that is the peak for the demo and the peak for total viewership. It was definitely the peak for total viewership regardless. So I know the reaction to this was that if you put a great wrestling match on between, two guys who are having a really good match and technical match with the basics, and it wasn't a car crash match, that it can keep viewers sucked in, and it did.
The season premiere of Raw on Monday night, 1,483,000 viewers, 0.44 in the demo. So they were down 5% in viewers, but in all of their younger demographics, they were up, not by an appreciable amount, but they were up 4% in the 18 to 49 demo, up 6% in 18 to 34. And this was going up against a pretty big Monday night game involving the Dallas Cowboys, which was airing on ABC and ESPN.
And the ESPN Deportes was an extra 85,000 viewers.
Can't discount those 85,000.
Yeah, but the Cowboys, I did a study like a couple of years ago to look at every team and is there
who's a draw?
Which NFL team on Monday nights had the best average? And I think it was the Cowboys. But that is something that is known apparently in sports media, that the Cowboys do good ratings. But this was like some of these numbers compared to the last 4 weeks are just zero. So pretty typical number of what Raw has been doing on Monday nights against Monday Night Football. The year-over-year comparisons, though, are down substantially. I probably have them here. In terms of like since the middle of August or early August, somewhere around there, the year-over-year comparisons for Raw have started to become negative. And in fact, in total viewership, I guess you could look at it, it's been negative for a number of months in a row now. Whereas SmackDown's still doing pretty strong in its year-over-year comparison. SmackDown's ratings compared to the prior year, even in comparing the Paul Levesque era to the Paul Levesque era, if you will, SmackDown's still improving. I suppose it helps you got John Cena on the show and you had Roman Reigns on the show this past Friday. But Raw is really showing signs of, sort of being, maybe you want to, say there's a certain adjustment that you should make because cord cutting is happening and people are watching TV less. But nonetheless, Raw is not doing as well as SmackDown is, and on a relative basis, certainly not doing as well as NXT is.
The question that every fan just wants to know is what is the level that requires the call to fill? That's what they want to know.
Yeah, I don't think that's happening anytime soon. I think you guys talked about it, that you don't need to grab him up right away, right? It probably saves you something to wait in terms of how much you would have to pay him, and it's probably the right thing psychologically to not bring him in right away if you don't want to have the same problems that AEW dealt with.
Do you have any differing opinions now that we've had a couple weeks, where almost 3 weeks into Adam Copeland being a regular on AEW programming? Like, do you have any thoughts, like one way or the other, about how this has worked? I will say, like, just looking the Canadian numbers, like he's not like exploding numbers, but there's been a recognizable difference that he has made there. And we've had a few examples now of him in key segments, and I guess just this short of a time in, like, are you able to, make a determination on what kind of an investment this has been, bringing in an Adam Copeland, who, like, my argument is just like, it is someone that, again, he's turning 50 next week. Like, Christian is turning 50 next month. Like, you are going to have, and that, whether it's good or bad, like, that is your number one, if not number two program in the company now, is Edge against Christian. And I think it's fine to have some of those figures in there. I guess the balance is how many of those figures do you have prominently featured on your programming?
Yeah, I mean, he's, in terms of a ticket draw, I mean, AEW is still having the issues it's having with selling tickets. I understand Mystico has popped a house for tonight.
He's
Texas.
the guy. He's the guy.
Yeah.
Only
so
40.
maybe they need to sign Mystico and run more of the Southwest.
Yeah.
But
the Cubs fan, he was the guy that, everyone needs to be listening to. Maybe Tony Khan, I would think he is listening to the thoughts of the Cubs fan.
He definitely is. He said so. I think that this is getting more to sort of a next level TNA in terms of the number of people that they have here who used to be in WWE and used to be fairly big stars in WWE. In terms of metrics, I can say, wow, some of these YouTube videos for his early run here have done really strongly. And what does that indicate? Something? It indicates something. And these are, YouTube videos are global. It's not just the US. Some of his core hours have done well too. I think, like, in terms of a brand, though, it's becoming more and more removed from what I thought AEW was going to be at the beginning, in terms of being this alternative brand that was going to be different from WWE in a lot of ways. And you can make an argument that we need to appeal to the masses here, but it's a lot of people who used to be in WWE. I was just seeing something that Tony was tweeting earlier about, just hyping up Dynamite, and like it was Edge and someone else from WWE and someone else from WWE who was being hyped.
Yeah, I go back to that 98 period, and like I've said this before, but I think one of the, like, Austin and Rock, I feel they were going to break through and become major stars, but how much was the laneway cleared by not having your Bretts and Seans in their way, and your audience seeing that transition in real time, where those figures are still present on the show. Instead, that 1998 period was one of young stars that had not been pushed as main eventers before. So we were watching these people in real time ascending to these levels. And if you remember, like, that year, Hogan's contract was up with WCW. They had flirtations of bringing Ultimate Warrior in. How different is 98 if you throw in, if a Nash had stuck around, if a Hall had stuck around, if a Hogan is in there? It's a totally different dynamic as opposed
or if
to
they had hired somebody who was 50 years old in 1998, who would that even be? Like Bruno Sammartino or something?
that's it. I mean, yeah, like Pedro Morales did not fit in the Attitude Era. And I look at AEW and like I can make individual cases on why you want to have a Sting, why you want to have an Edge, why you want to have a Christian. I have a harder time making a concerted argument for all of them to be there. And like you just take a name off the WWE roster and AJ Styles. If AJ Styles became available tomorrow, I think Tony Khan is taking him in a heartbeat. And again, it goes to the question of like, it's not so much like who fits in AEW, like who doesn't fit in AEW. And it seems to be that if you are of that era, like you are like, that would be another star. I think they would grab an AJ Styles in a second. And again, it's a lot of these performers too, that with the price tag that they come with, like they're going to require big programs, lots of television time. And then you get scenes like Collision. That wasn't the biggest deal in the world, but nonetheless, it's here is your guy, your WWE franchise player and an Edge that's come in. And I mean, here's the vanilla midget Rock lookalike that's in the ring. And it was just such a dismissive line. But I think to some fans, they're going to take that as more of a, here's the big WWE guy coming in. And this is their thought of like a quote unquote homegrown act in a Ricky Starks.
Yeah. To be fair, Bruno Sammartino in 1998 would have been 63. So maybe that's an exaggeration.
Still could have gone. I think.
Yeah. He could go to superstar Billy Graham or something, Bob Backlund. But yeah, you were talking about the Code Conference earlier. There was somebody, I forget his name, John something, who runs John Lovett, who runs a podcasting business. He was talking about how it's just harder to break through now. I think there was something that happened in somewhere around 2010 or something like that. And when maybe around the time that smartphones got in everybody's pocket and streaming media became available widely, that makes it harder to become a star than before. That is probably offsetting the point I think that we're making here, in that if more established names are just out of the way, maybe that would motivate AEW to, create new fresh stars, and new fresh stars are almost always what's associated with these increases in business, whether it's Hogan in 84 and whether it's Okada in 2012 more recently. Yet on the other hand, I guess that's cutting it close, Okada in 2012. But yeah,
Okada just squeezed through the last star.
Yeah, and it's a different country and different culture maybe, but yeah, it's I think if AEW is going to become a lot more popular than it is, it's probably going to be on the backs of new fresh stars. But there's something different in this era compared to any other era historically, in that there's just lasting value to the Edges of the world, more so than there was to the Bob Backlunds in 20 years ago, so that they do have lasting value, and it helps that they are taking care of their bodies better, so they do physically last longer. But it's something that you really have to manage, and I think it's really attractive to get these stars in who have really strong name value, who can still perform well, and balance that against creating a new slew of talent that's going to take you through the next 20 years.
The name of the segment tonight is the Rated R Rebuttal from Adam Copeland to Christian Cage. The Rated R Rebuttal. So I don't know what he's going to be doing.
Edge versus Christian.
Well, alert the censors for tonight's segment. Before we tee up next week's show, which is going to be a very fun show that we have to tell everybody about, one final note I have for you, Brandon, from Touring Data, who notes, The Weeknd earned his most attended concert of all time, August 18th, 2023, with 89,179 tickets sold at Wembley Stadium in London as part of the After Hours Till Dawn tour.
It's probably for Full Star.
89,179.
Mm-hmm. So that how would that compare to the announcement of paid attendees, 81,035? What kind of stage did the Weeknd have? We'd have to evaluate all those things.
What does the Brent Council have to say about this number?
We could ask them. They would probably tell us.
They probably would. And I wonder what the Venn diagram is of people that attended both shows, because I can confirm too with Davey Portman and Braden Harrington that attended both the Weeknd and All In.
Yeah, I'm just looking in our the Weeknd. Yeah, it is in there. It is in Polestar, so that's where he got that from.
Oh, that correlates to the number from Polestar.
Yeah, $9.25 million US was the gross that Polestar has for it.
Will he get a tattoo? Is the question I want to know. And when's a safe time to get a tattoo?
The Weeknd is a person. It's a single.
Yes.
It's not a band. Okay.
Yeah, the Weeknd, Canada's own, Toronto,
Clearly.
really Scarborough's own. Next to Wei Ting, the biggest
Really?
Scarborough native. Oh yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Well, next week, it is Hall of Fame season. The
yeah.
Observer Hall of Fame. The ballots are out.
How many ballots did you get?
3.
Same.
There were a few updates throughout. Some new rules to go through. We will bring everyone up to speed on that. So next week we're going to go over. I think I'm going to reveal my ballot next week. I don't know, Brandon, if you'll have your voting. The deadline isn't until November 8th, but I'm going to try and have my picks by next week. So we are going to go through. We won't be able to go through every candidate. We'll probably focus on a couple of the areas and some of the more interesting additions to this year's one. I can't see there being.
Are you voting in?
I am going to be voting in. Let's just pull this up here. So the categories. I vote in the historical candidates era.
I think I'm going to abstain from that category this year. I think I'm only going to vote in U.S., Canada, and Japan. And
I don't vote in Mexico, and I don't vote in the European section. There's also a maximum this year for each category, as high as you can go. So it's not an unlimited for the non-wrestlers category. So we'll go over all the criteria next week. But I think this is going to be a pretty quiet year because they've added the Young Bucks to the ballot. So I can't imagine there being too much apprehension or negativity towards
Roman Reigns is on the ballot here.
Roman Reigns is on the ballot. Punk is on the ballot.
Sounds like Roman Reigns got a pretty strong endorsement from Dave the other day.
Will that make a difference?
Yes.
The endorsement. It's like the New York Times editorial.
It's okay to feel this way now. Yeah.
So next week, joining us to go over the Observer Hall of Fame will be, for the first time, you might know him as Alan Forel. Alan Cunahan will be on the show with us, a celebrity when it comes to these online professional wrestling, the coverage of professional wrestling's history. Alan Forel joining us. So the man is not just studying; he is going to a physical library to deduce who makes it onto the Alan Forel ballot.
I need to get the story of what he's going to a library for, what he's researching at the library as it relates to the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame.
Maybe he's going to go pull out those Jack Pfeffer files and go through the history of the industry. I look forward to having Alan Forel on. Alan is someone that when I have been like on the cusp of certain candidates, especially in the Japanese category, he is one of the people I've leaned on. Be like, convince me of this person. Like what am I missing on this person? So I think Alan will be a great guest next week. I've never done a show with Alan before.
Never, really?
Never. No,
Wow.
We've actually joked about this. The fact we've never done a show together, so we'd have to find out a great reason to do one, and I think this is it.
I don't think I've ever done one either, so it'll be a first for both of us.
I've met him. I know the man exists, so we can confirm that much. So there you go. Looking forward to that next week. And coming up this Sunday, it is Wrestlenomics Radio with Brandon Thurston, Chris Gullo, and Jesse Collins. So patreon.com/Wrestlenomics is where you can go every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. And
Yes.
Brandon, this is a patron-only show because it will be 2 weeks until your next free show.
That's well. Wait a minute. How many Sundays are left?
You've got 2.
There's 2 more Sundays. Yes.
Yeah.
No, Chris Gullo is away camping or something. So he won't be
Camping?
joining us. Yes, I think so.
In October. Brave.
Yes. Did you see that they're no longer patrons? They're members now.
Oh my goodness. So Wei sent me this video this morning that he told me I have to watch called The Rise and Fall of Patreon. And that is not the title of a video I want to see.
Patreon is great. What are you talking about?
I hope so for my well-being. I hope it is. So he also added, I do not have any immediate concerns. That's what Wei said. So anyway, okay. I'll watch this video and report back. Yay to Patreon, where you can go and support patreon.com/postwrestling and patreon.com/Wrestlenomics that help us bring you shows such as this one on a weekly basis. So give Brandon a follow. We have NXT numbers that are dropping. Anything to report on the NXT ratings front before we bid everyone farewell?
798,000 viewers for NXT and a 0.23 in the demo.
So last week was a 0.30, so down a bit. And last week was what, over 900,000 viewers. I can't remember the exact number. So a dip, but I would say still a healthy number for NXT on a Tuesday. That would have been going up against Major League Baseball playoffs.
Yeah, they did 921 last week against AEW with all the stars. The week before that, they did 857. Again, this week doing 798. So back to the normal level. I would say the demo is it did a 0.22 2 weeks ago. Did a 0.23 this week.
Will we get any tweets from any rival wrestling promoters about this week's rating?
I hope not. I think that issue has been fully litigated.
I look forward to the next week of X drama. But that's going to wrap it up for Brandon Thurston. I am John Pollock. A big thank you to our guest, Paul Lesko, for joining us. You can go follow him for all the latest on the comings and goings of WWE and Panini. What's your expectation, Brandon? How long does this thing last? I'm going to give it. I think it ends first quarter 2024. Quiet settlement that Panini gives you a boilerplate statement on, and WWE ignores your request for comment. That's my prediction.
I mean, that's probably, well, of course that. They probably this is a lever to like make us give you some money, to make us give Panini some money to make this go away, so we can go do what we want to do. Yeah, with Fanatics.
Okay, so that's the latest. You're now all up to date on Ari Emanuel, Vince McMahon, documentaries, the trading card front. You're going to sound so wise to your pro wrestling friends when you bring up Panini the next time you are all talking about this subject.
More than just a sandwich.
That's it. A lot of knowledge being dispensed over the past hour. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and tune in tonight, Rewind to Dynamite, 10 Eastern, with myself and Mr. Wei Ting here on the Post YouTube channel. And that's it for us. Goodbye.